Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our fireside chat, Leading Districts Toward a Learner-Centered Future, hosted by the Learner-Centered Collaborative and Digital Promise. We are excited to welcome you here today to join us for a conversation with superintendents across the country to share about what they are learning, how they are innovating in supporting teachers and students as we continue to navigate challenging times within our schools across the country. But there's good news as well in terms of the work that is happening to support students and teachers. So I'm Kim Smith. I'm the Chief Inclusive Innovation Officer at Digital Promise. I welcome you today. I will start by framing up some housekeeping notes for our conversation. First of all, the chat function, please utilize the chat function to connect with folks that are out there in the world on this session online right now. Feel free to share your name, your location, your organization in the chat. And if you have questions for our panelists, use the QA button, which is at the bottom of your screen, to submit questions, and we will do our best to tackle as many questions as possible today. I am excited to welcome these folks to our conversation today. We have Katie Martin, who's an author and the CIO of the Learner-Centered Collaborative. Marlon Stiles, who is superintendent of Middletown City School District in Ohio. Tom Rooney, who's superintendent of Lindsay Unified School District in California. Susan Enfield, who's superintendent of Highline Public School District in Washington State. And Eric Burmeister, who's superintendent of Menlo Park City Schools in California. I want to welcome you all and ask you to turn on your camera so we can see your lovely faces here. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And we're going to go ahead and dive in. I was waiting for our fire to arrive, but we're gonna get started without our fire. But good to see you all today. I'm going to start by just going around the circle here and have everyone say hello. For those of you that are leading districts, if you can share a little bit about your district, where it's located, the students that you serve, that would be lovely. So let's start with Katie, since you are co-hosting with us. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Great, glad to be here. Katie Martin, Chief Impact Officer at the Learner-Centered Collaborative, and just really excited about the work that these superintendents are doing and excited to highlight the great practices for students.
Great, thank you. Susan.
Hi, everybody. Susan Enfield, proud superintendent of Highline Public Schools, serving a richly diverse community of about 17,500 students just south of Seattle.
Thanks, Susan. Eric.
Good morning, everybody. It's such an honor to be here. My name is Eric Burmeister. I'm the superintendent of Menlo Park City School District in the heart of Silicon Valley. We are a diverse school district with a lot of resource, and we serve preschool through 8th grade. So we're one of the unique districts that are in our nation that serve a specific age group, not the entire K-12 span.
Thanks, Eric. Tom?
Good morning, Tom Rooney, the superintendent of schools at Lindsay Unified. We are located in the Central Valley of California, primarily an agriculture or farming community. About 90% of our children are children of color, and 100% are free and reduced lunch. 53% come to us speaking a language other than English, and they come and really look to our system to provide them a path to opportunity in life. So glad to be here with you today.
Thanks, Tom. And Marlon.
Good afternoon, everyone. Marlon Stiles, proud superintendent, Middletown City Schools in Southwest Ohio. Excited to be here today representing a very urban, proud district. For all the Ohio folks on the call, Hootie!
Appreciate that, and want to welcome our fire, and let's get cozy here. So the conversation here is focused on how districts are centering learners today and into the future. We will focus on understanding how our superintendents are developing a culture of agency to engage their learners and close equity gaps, building learner profiles to support students as they on their pathways through school, opening micro schools, leveraging technology, meeting students where they are academically, socially, emotionally, physically, and building on the lessons learned and the bright spots that have emerged over the past 2 years in particular. We're going to start by inviting Tom at Lindsay Unified. Tom, you've been on this journey for a while as a superintendent. Many look to Lindsay Unified as an exemplary district for learner-centered practices. Would love to hear from you about the bright spots that you're seeing and what you've learned, particularly as you look at the past couple of years.
Well, thank you, Kim, and glad to be here with all of you and those who are participating today. When I think about our journey and learner-centeredness and having been the superintendent now, this is my 10th year as a superintendent at Lindsay, is our bright spots are that our learners, despite the situations that they face in their life, they come to school every day and they love school and they love learning and they love one another. And so it's a cultural transformation that's happened in their life. And for so many of these children who are facing multi-generations of poverty in their family and just the challenges of lack of literacy and lack of support at home, they come to our schools and they are connected. They are met at their academic learning level. They are challenged and they feel a sense of belonging in community. And so it's just a bright spot when, in the last month or so, as we've come back from our winter break, I've probably spoken with, 50 or 60 learners throughout all of our learning communities. And in my conversations with them, just the way to summarize is they're just happy. I mean, despite what's going on, they're just happy the schools are open. And so many of them had said to me, I mean, like, well, what's going well for you right now? They're like, we're in school and don't ever close the schools again, Mr. Rooney, and we love being here. And I'd ask about, so what is it that you like about it? And they're like, all of these people here, they care about us. They care about my learning. Have you ever seen Mrs. Gonzalez? She's going to make sure I learn no matter what. And it just goes on and on. So our learners have a mindset about themselves and about their possibilities and what they receive. But I think also some really powerful bright spots, or what I'm seeing is high levels of engagement, ownership, dreaming of possibilities. I think when you look at our data, even pre-pandemic, we had 7 years of academic achievement gains. And then even in the pandemic, we didn't so much lose learning, we kind of just flatlined. But we have 75% of our learners go on to college after they leave our system, and 53% of those are getting a college degree in 4 years. And so they're succeeding when they leave our system. And so I think that the data points, when you are learner-centered and you create a system that is designed and makes it clear to the learners, this is what you're supposed to learn. These are the many ways that you can demonstrate your proficiency. We're going to stick with you and give you what you need, whether that's more time, whether that's a different resource, whether that's a different adult, whether that's some type of a program or whatever it might be. We're going to meet you at your level. We're going to give you the resources you need to ensure your success. And until you demonstrate that success, you're just not done yet. We're going to keep working with you. And it's not a positive or a negative. It's just where you are in your learning. And so definitely when I tell people, what I tell people is come and meet the Lindsay learners. And pre-pandemic, we had about 300 visitors a year, and they just spend a day in the life with the Lindsay learner. And when they do that, they see what's possible for children from impoverished situations, and they see what's possible for English learners. And so I think I just start off, and I think some of the things we've learned was, I think the last part of your question was, we've learned that don't make it harder than it needs to be. Okay. What learner-centeredness is it's what the very best educators have done always, right? We've all had them in our life. We've had somebody, whether we were a first grader or eighth grader, whatever it was, we had somebody who knew us, cared about us, met us at our level, and did not let us out of their system or their class until we learned, right? We all had those people. That's what learner-centeredness is. And it's actually honoring the principle that every learner learns in a different way in a different time frame. And what we've done in Lindsay is we've been able to build that as a system-wide approach where every learner is met with that type of philosophy and that type of learning opportunity. And so that's one thing. Don't make it harder than it is. And then most importantly, listen to the voices of the learners. Administrators and others, we can sit around the table and try to dream up solutions to problems and figure things out. Go talk to the kids. Ask them what they need. Ask them what they really need. Ask them what they want. And they'll tell you what to do with their system. And so we have structures and systems to listen to our learners and to make sure that their voice is heard, their voice is elevated, because the system ultimately is their system, not our system.
Wow, thanks, Tom, for that opening set of thoughts. I love how you're underscoring this idea of knowing us and caring for us, and how that's at the root of this idea of learner-centered approaches. Susan, so a lot of learnings from the pandemic. Maybe you can touch on some of the positives that have emerged that you think are sustainable and will get weaved into the fabric of Highline. So you want to start there?
Absolutely. And I'll build on what my friend Tom talked about so well, and why any of us would be happy and proud to have our children in his schools. There's a fundamental human need, whether you're 5 or 50, to be seen and to be supported and have your needs met. And so, as a former high school teacher, I knew that it really just took one. It took one meaningful adult relationship to keep a student seen, supported, and on track to success. And so when I arrived in Highline back in 2012, like Tom, this is my 10th year serving as superintendent, we developed our Highline Promise. So rather than a mission or vision, we have made a promise to our students, to our families, to our community, to know every student by name, strength, and need, so they graduate prepared for the future they choose. And that promise was the DNA of our system long before the pandemic hit. But it served us well during the pandemic because it served as our touchstone to remind us what mattered most. Every webinar we did on safety protocols and distancing and masking, we always led with that promise. So keeping the human factor front and center, I think, is what's critical. And then on a practical, strategic scale, if you're leading with and from that promise, that compels you as the adults in the system to not do what is comfortable or easy for you, but to do what our students need and deserve and tell us they want. And so in Highline, we had, a number of students for whom virtual learning did work. Now, I think we would all agree that for the vast majority of students, in-person learning is by far the best. But there are some for whom they were like, this really works for me. And I said to my team, we have an obligation now to continue that as an option. How do we take that away from students who have finally, in some cases, found success in their own learning? So we launched our Highline Virtual Academy in grades 6 through 12 as a permanent school within the system, so that those students could keep learning in that way. And we also, in listening to families, heard that families of our elementary students wanted a virtual option this year. We didn't establish a virtual academy for our youngest learners, but we did provide, and it turned out to be about 600 students across our K-5 elementary schools who chose that option. So now we're looking next year at creating an elementary remote school as well, because that seems to be something that is working for our students and our families. And so I think what I would say overall is that for us to not apply what we have learned over the past 2 years it absolutely means that we are decentering and devaluing student voice and family wishes and priorities. And so I think we have to keep finding ways to push ourselves. As I say to my Highline colleagues, if we're going to do right by our children, we're going to make our lives as the adults harder. Deal with it. That's how the equation works, people. We're the grown-ups, and we have to keep pushing ourselves to do things that aren't easy, but that are hard and challenging so that our kids can get what they truly need in order to succeed. And in order to show that public education is the best thing we have going in this country to propel ourselves forward and come out of the past 2.5 years stronger and better.
Great, thanks, Susan. Let's go to Marlon in Middletown in Ohio. You have put a big emphasis on culture, community, closing the equity gaps in your community. Can you talk a little bit about what you've been learning, what you've been hearing from your students, and how have you brought students into your learning process in Middletown?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for being here, everyone. Excited to spend some time with you this afternoon. Share a little bit about Mady Rising. What you see is our culture behind us, right? It's not a hashtag, it's a culture. It's who we are, how we go about doing our business. It's life in Middletown City Schools, and every single staff member, every single student, and every single community member eats, sleeps, and breathes the culture of our school district. Pre-pandemic, during the pandemic, and probably post-pandemic, we'll continue with our culture-based all the time behaviors. What we've been hearing from our children pre-pandemic and even during the pandemic is just listen to us, right? Create some environments that are for us where you just get to listen. And the more we executed some of those behaviors, we truly got a feel of what our children were looking for, and it helped guide our decision-making at a district and building level. We got Principal Nicole Fisher at Highview 6th Grade Center. She engages kids on a frequent basis, and it guides some of her decision-making amongst her staff, especially on her teacher-based teams. We have a student advisory council where we listen to children and they guide us as far as programming for the future. We also hear our children oftentimes say, I've got a light at the end of my tunnel. And Katie, we've talked about this before. I just need help navigating the journey to execute a path to make my dream come true, to reach that light at the end of the tunnel. So as a district, we're starting to adjust and recreate, I won't say reform, but really transform our school system to really allow our children to better navigate their journey, K-12, to make their dreams come true. We're also finding that our children are very interested in having a strong sense of belonging inside the walls of our classrooms. That's a reality for children across the United States of America. Our children want a strong sense of belonging. So things that we can do better, right, that I've really been thinking about here lately is really asking myself the question, which child is furthest away from the opportunity? Right? We often get caught up in our behaviors I know I do, I'll take ownership of this. And you get so caught up in visioning and planning and thinking through, oh, this would be a cool opportunity for children. But I've been trying to slow my thought process down here lately and really think about which child specifically is farthest away from the opportunity. Really get in and have conversation and dialogue with that student or those student groups, specific student groups, and get a feel of the reasons why that the system is really causing some of those opportunity gaps to happen as they navigate the system. So it is my hope that as we really continue to move forward, especially here in our school district, we continue to just listen before we create programs or opportunities, or really create some very specific conversations to really get a true sense of why our school system is causing some of those opportunity gaps or equity gaps or access barriers. And then once we truly understand from the student perspective why, then it gives us a really clear path and a whiteboard, so to say, to really draw up some potential solutions to specifically and effectively give kids some greater opportunities. So for anyone listening, if you've got some strategies, please drop them in the chat for us. But I would encourage you as you move forward to really ask specific questions, try to personify really the learner-centered approach specifically for a child or a student that you're really thinking about as you navigate a response and create opportunities for kids. Our kids are definitely worth it. You heard it from Tom, you heard it from Susan, you're going to hear from Eric here in just a few moments. Every child is worth it. So give them that platform that they need to be heard, and then have a blast working alongside them to try to navigate a way to make that opportunity come true.
I love that. Thank you very much. Hashtag listen to students. Appreciate that, Marlon. Let's go to Eric in Menlo Park, and would love for you to share a little bit about your whole child framework that you've developed in Menlo Park, how it came to be, how you're breathing life into it with your learners, and talk a little bit about what it means to you to be a learner-centered school district.
Great. Well, thanks so much. And it's such an honor to be on this panel with two organizations that I respect deeply and with superintendents who are my educational heroes and people that I look up to. So thank you for having me and our story here. I think one of the, I'm going to take a more of a tactical approach to answering your question, because I think a lot of people, if I think of who I was and where I was at 10 years ago when I started in the school district, and trying to think about how we navigate this process of moving our focus in public education from building schools based on the needs of adults and transitioning that to building schools based on the needs of students. There's a lot of great intention, but how you do that tactically as a system leader can be super challenging. And so some of the things I think that we've learned in the process that has sort of resulted in our Whole Child Learning and Development Framework, which is available on our district's website, is thinking about how innovation and how change happens. And so we thought deeply about Robert's diffusion of innovation model. And I see Katie smirking a little bit because she hears me refer to that quite a bit. While Robert's diffusion of innovation is specifically, the research is based in implementation of technology, it really is the process of implementation of change. And change starts with those people on the bleeding edge, those people who are willing to take risks, those people who are willing to do something different. And so our Whole Child Learning and Development Framework, which is now district-wide, and it's how and who we are, started because we created space, we created options, so we created the choice. We created support and incentives for people to jump on board with an idea. And that idea was, how do we make our classrooms learner-centered rather than adult-centered? And we, year after year, got more and more people involved. And in that very first part of the process, we said to them in this zone of innovation, we said, you can do whatever you want, but we want you to come together first and start with a vision for what it is that you want to have happen. And so we engaged in design thinking. We partnered with, in design, they call it T-shaped teams. We partnered with outside organizations such as the Learner Center Collaborative, Digital Promise, the League of Innovative Schools, Chan Zuckerberg Institute, Transcend, and so forth. We went and we visited other school districts like Lindsay Unified, and we encouraged these innovators who were teachers in our district to take some big risks. And they, one of the pieces that they did was they created basically 5 pillars that would drive their work. And year after year, as more and more people got excited about the vision for reorienting their classroom and reorienting their schools and their school culture, it started to become much more ubiquitous throughout the district. So in every school, you heard people talking about what it meant to have meaningful work, what it meant to provide feedback in an evidence-based way, what it meant to be learner-centered, what it meant to have integrated well-being. And so over time, what started within our zone of innovation became much more observable throughout the school district. And it wasn't one moment, but there becomes a place where you realize, and this is in Robert's diffusion of innovation, that you've crossed the chasm, and that the things that you are doing have become sticky. What came out of that was our Whole Child Learning and Development Framework. And we realized that we had achieved that level of ubiquity when the majority of our staff and our parents and our kids could talk fluidly about it. And that's when the Whole Child Learning and Development Framework came from something that defined the zone of innovation to what defined Menlo Park City School District.
Great, Eric, thanks for taking us through that journey. That's really helpful to hear. Katie, we're hearing words such as human factor, care, ownership, engagement, belonging, seen, supported, listen, options, choice, well-being, right? These are some of the words I've captured from our superintendents around this idea of learner-centered. You work with schools, districts, teachers, administrators across the country. You're a mom of 2 school-age kids. Maybe you can talk a little bit about the bright spots that you're seeing from where you sit.
Yeah, all those words just bring joy to my teacher and mama heart, thinking about what we really want for our young people. And just honored to be with these superintendents and you, Kim, having been in each of your schools, districts, worked with your teachers, worked with your community. I know that these are leaders who are leading by learning and really creating this sense of belonging. And it's not just a vision, a mission statement, a framework. So those are important. It brings shared language, but it's also in, as Eric just said, the DNA of how we work, how we engage with people, and how each and every person thinks about their own journey and what it means to truly be a learner. So when I think about the bright spots, I am really starting to see more and more leaders, families, learners starting to understand that success is more than a test score. Success is more than just doing well on a test, and really starting to have conversations about this. And so I was working with another superintendent actually in Pennsylvania recently, and he was getting data from his community, like all of these leaders have. And we're talking about really creating a new vision of success. And he was saying that the data show parents and teachers think success is about joy, belief, belonging, all the things that we're just talking about. And students say doing well on a test. Students say my parents and my teachers are proud of me when I get good test scores. So what that tells me, and what I see time and time again, is that our words and our actions don't always align to what we truly believe about success and what we've experienced through success in our own lives. So I think that the bright spots for me are districts and communities who are starting to come together and have really meaningful conversations about what they want for learners, and expanding the view of success from, narrowly, we've done well on a test score or we're an AB school, and thinking about what kind of students you want to produce, what your commitment is to developing them along the way. And so that's a beautiful bright spot that we're getting there as communities. And so I think that we need to continue to not only talk about what success is, but start to align our metrics and our conversations and what we portray to the community about success in our schools. And we're seeing that happen. And so I think that in the next couple of years, we're going to see more and more of that, starting to move beyond just what's been in the past.
Great, thank you for your thoughts. I'd like to, there were some questions that were submitted, and I'd like to kind of ask you all to respond to this notion of how do we transform rather than reform. And if you can think about the work your districts have been doing over the past 2 or 3 years, a question about systems transformation, right? At the League of Innovative Schools, we talk about systems transformation. This is why you all are part of this network. How would you say that your system has evolved over the past couple of years? Are there policies that have changed, practices? Are you thinking about kind of funding allocations differently? I'm going to open the floor to anyone who wants to step in here, but we'd love to hear how you have seen transformation take place within your system.
Well, Kim, I'll jump in. And I know we're talking bright spots, so I don't want to go dark, but I do, don't fake your funk, right? We have to be honest and real about the challenges as well. And, in the early days of the pandemic, there was a lot of pretty talk about, we're not going back to normal. We're going to transform. Our school systems are going to be wholly different. Anyone out there can say that they are wholly transformed and approaching education in a truly different way? Not so much. Good things happening, to be sure. So I do believe that we still have a window of opportunity to make transformational change, but we're going to have to work harder. And we're going to have more honest conversations. So I just want to put that caveat out there to challenge us to not shy away from continuing to push and have the hard conversations that we need to have around our systems. That said, I do believe that the pandemic gave us a chance to operationalize some things and take to scale some things that we had been doing in smaller ways. So for example, I'll relate it back to our Highline Promise. And I just wrote about this in the latest edition of School Administrator Magazine, that, you know, we focused so much on the digital divide early on. We had a relationship divide. We had a trust divide. Like, those are the divides that we need to start talking about if we're really going to transform. So how are we making sure that we have no invisible children in our schools anymore? That no child can say that they go through a school day without having a positive interaction with an adult who knows them and supports them and challenges them and holds them accountable. And so how are we operationalizing that? And in Highline, we've really worked to try to make sure that our children who need that the most have an adult assigned to them, so that there is that relationship building. But I think fundamentally focusing on relationships in school and making sure every child is connected, yes, to the internet, but more importantly, to one another, to the adults in their school, and to their school community, is how we're going to get to the transformation we'd all like to see.
Yeah, Susan, it's getting hot in here, right? With that fire on the screen. Thanks for that perspective. So I think you bring up something very unique, right? So I want to talk about a different type of pandemic, and it has nothing to do with the coronavirus. Our children have been in a pandemic for a long time. And some of that is because of socioeconomic status, race, whatever it may be, but our children have been in a pandemic. So what we've been trying to do is really shift the dialogue around how do we transform adult behaviors so that our children have a stronger sense of belonging. Again, just short and sweet for the sake of Q&A right now, we are exploring right now onboarding our district K-12 with micro-credentials through Digital Promise that are all centered around diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we're not going through diversity, equity, inclusion training. Training is a singular event. We are building brand new learning and awareness and transitioning that into classroom-based adult behaviors that generate a stronger sense of belonging through our children. So as you think of micro-credentials, Digital Promise has a wide variety of diversity, equity, and inclusion driven micro-credentials that you can explore that result in a change in behavior. Just one way to address a different type of pandemic that results in greater student learning or access to it.
Kim, this is Eric. I'd just like to add, and I know we don't want everybody to answer every question, but I think this is a critical piece. If there's somebody out there who wants to take one step that has long-lasting impacts in so many other areas, focus on grading. How we evaluate kids and how we communicate what they know and what they can do is the single most impactful step that you can take in this work.
Great, thank you, Eric, for that thought. I wonder a little bit around how you think about what we're doing now that we should not be doing, what we should keep doing. So if you had to name one thing that you were going to press forward on around keeping learners centered, and one piece that you're looking to either scale back on or something that may have evolved and dissipated within your district, any thoughts regarding that question?
Since I haven't had a chance to talk yet, no, I'm just kidding. I would just echo it's that transformation piece. To go back to your previous question too, the transformation piece. It is about, first and foremost, changing adult mindsets. When you change adult mindsets, you change what's possible for children. And Eric is right on. Tackle grading, and it sets it all up. Because that's a weight-bearing wall right now that is keeping everything from being learner-centered in most systems. Okay, and then to this piece of what can we either stop doing or continue doing. When I think of that, I think one of the things we have to be conscientious of right now is, and it's a little bit of the push that Susan was giving us, but we want to push right now for high expectations and high academic achievement and high personal excellence and all of these pieces, but we have to kind of be mindful right now of people's well-being, adult well-being, learner well-being, parent well-being. So I would just kind of put that out there right now as to something we need to do more of is we need to do more at paying more attention to how people are actually feeling right now and what people are dealing with. And we have to know how hard and what to push in the system, and what to just kind of like back off for a little while, and what to give a little grace on for a while. It's not about lowering expectations, but it's about listening to where your people are, because it's about the long haul. It's the long journey here. It's not about, you might have to give up something a little bit right now in order to really make transformational happen in the future, because people at every level of the organization, whether they're 3 years old or 90 years old, are struggling. And as leaders, and we have to listen to that and honor that.
I think that's such an important point, Tom. And when we talk about things that we maybe want to let go of moving forward, I think burning the perfect attendance certificates is a great place to start. And I also think us actively dismantling this notion that the last car in the parking lot gets a cookie. I think, Tom, this goes to supporting the well-being of our learners and our adults in the system. Frankly, our adults are learners too. So supporting all human beings in the system, big and little, but the long game, right? What are the cultural things that we are going to reject moving forward? And also that taking a sick day, taking a mental health day is a legitimate reason to taking a sick day. If you just need to pull back for a little bit, take that day. And how do we communicate to our staff that that's okay? Not only is it okay, we encourage you to do that if that's what you need to show up. Because when you show up to school, I need you to bring your A game, because that's what our kids need. So take care of yourself so that when you do show up, you can bring your A game.
Yeah, I want to build on that, Susan, because I think one of the things we need to do, where we know that all adults want a more flexible workforce, right? They want to be able to have those opportunities. And too often in schools, we don't allow our educators to be human, because you can't take a day off. You can't leave your kids. And so if we really want to create more well-being, more opportunities for people to show up as their best and whole selves, we have to create structures in schools where one teacher is not responsible for one classroom solely. And there's a lot of great organizations. ASU is working on the next education workforce, but it's really important to think how we create teams of educators, community members, paraprofessionals, new incoming teachers to build the pipeline, but also build a community of people who can support students together, so that people can take time and really bring their best selves to the student experience.
Incredible. I love hearing some of these stops and starts. So thank you for that. Eric, I actually do want you to elaborate. I've been watching the chat. Chat's on fire here. Would you mind elaborating a little bit on the homework piece?
Yeah, I just realized that my comment actually just went to the host and panelists. So I definitely don't need to, they don't need to hear from me. So I think, first of all, I just want to say amen to everything that was just said before. But if we were going to leave one thing behind, I would leave homework behind. That is not to say that there aren't some examples of homework being beneficial, but I think generally speaking, homework reinforces obedience, not learning. And that homework makes adults feel better. And I don't just mean our teachers, it also makes parents feel better. And I think we have to disabuse ourselves of this idea that homework is the holy grail. And so if we, sort of like right after grading, I would say, let's look at our homework practices. Homework is generally inequitable. It's not always very good in terms of formative data. And it oftentimes becomes just an act of obedience. And I think it's sort of, past its prime.
Great, thank you. Wanted to get that in, appreciate that. Question around, where does technology live in learner-centered experiences and environments? Where does technology live, or where should it live? Where is it best served for technology to support a learner-centered environment? Any thoughts come to mind on that question?
I think I would say first and foremost, to dispel the myth that learner-centered education is about just the technology. That's not what it is. You heard all of us say it's relationships, it's people, it's children, it's all these other things. So just kind of anybody still wondering that, get rid of that. And however, we would say that technology is one effective accelerator for learners possibility. It honors, allows us to honor a principle that learning can happen anywhere and anytime. So if a learner learns best at 3 o'clock in the morning, boom, they can jump on and go for it. And, and somebody else on the weekend or whatever it might be. So it honors that principle. And there are a lot more programs now that are geared towards learner levels. Like they can, and we all know of them and we can name them. They're becoming more and more about, you're at this level, you demonstrate this competency, you move on. And if you don't get it, here's a little tutorial. And so I would say that technology it plays a key role, but it is not the answer, because it doesn't replace relationships.
I would build on that, Tom, and bring us back to the notion of technology as it relates to equity in learning. So, and Marlon and I have been real proponents of this, as has the League and Digital Promise, that, when we had to go into distance learning, we had to scramble to make sure that every child had not just a working device, but home broadband access. And sadly, I think that we've let go of that push. And I think some of our kids and families are still relying, if anything, on hotspots, which is not a permanent solution. And some don't even have that. And I think that, what technology does, I'm all about get rid of stupid homework, but ensure that learning can happen any time of day. And technology allows our students to not have learning confined to when they're at school. They can log on at 11 o'clock at night if that's when, inspiration hits them to write that poem or investigate, the life cycle of a worm. I don't know. But I think that giving children access in that way so that their learning is not tied just to the school building is fundamentally an equity issue that I just don't see yet the collective will and refusal to go back to allowing that to happen. And I worry that we've let that go, and we're going to go back to perpetuating the inequities in our system if we don't address the universal broadband access.
Yeah, Susan, shocker, we were thinking the exact same thing when that question popped up, right? I'm thinking of that video you and I were tossing phones back and forth to each other, and then landed in Kim's hands. But I want to stay on that equity topic for just a moment. As I think about technology, I think about the inequities inside of some of the digital platforms that our kids are using to access learning. I would encourage us to really start thinking about, when technology does have a place for the learners, that we are challenging our vendors to answer some very tough questions for them that are specific to different student groups. How does this technology accelerate, to use Tom's term, accelerate the learning for our Black boys? How does this technology accelerate the learning for our non-English speaking students? Require them, right? Now, don't ask, but require them to show you the metrics, show you the data, show you the evidence, show you the reading passages that invite a diverse child, a brown or Black student, to be able to read across the passage and be able to respond to some of the questions that are not from the dominant culture perspective. So as you think about equity, really chop that up for the different student groups inside your district and challenge every single digital platform that your students have access to make sure they have a sense of belonging and can really accelerate their learning as they use it.
Yeah, I want to jump on that really quickly too, because I think we've been talking about different types of gaps. And I think another gap that we haven't talked about is the authenticity gap of the work that we're asking people to do. I've talked to a lot of students, done research on technology in the classroom, and students will tell me, well, now we have these great programs and my teachers don't talk to me anymore. They put on the board, do this lesson and do this playlist, but there's not the engagement. So, or the application to something that's authentic and meaningful to each individual person that allows them to research, investigate, inquire about problems that matter. And so there's a variety of ways that we can think about how we use technology, not that we just have it, but how are students accessing it, information, how are they taught to use it, and what are they doing as a result? So I really encourage us to think about supporting teachers to understand that it is a tool, but if we are really learner-centered, we are connecting with individuals, we're creating small groups, we're having a lot of check-ins and ensuring that students know where they are in their next steps. and that they have the right tools and resources to navigate their journey appropriately.
Great, thank you. We're going to go to an audience member question that is very practical. How are you balancing homegrown practices to further learner-centered education with existing curriculum or programs that you're bringing in? So if you think about how are you balancing what you're creating and building within your district as it relates to what you're bringing in, anyone want to tackle that question?
I don't know that we focus on like a conscientious balance. It's essentially giving learners what they need. And if what you have is providing learners needs, then you keep expanding and growing, developing like our, we've developed thousands and thousands of playlists at every single level that lives in our LMS. But if we have a need, like right now, we are not as strong in project-based learning and relevant learning opportunities. So we're working with a couple of organizations to actually bring that in and advance that. So give learners what they need and base your decisions on that.
Thanks, Tom.
Really struggling. I use the word struggling, but it's an exciting piece when I use that word. We're trying to find a way to really better blend the K-12 work experience, K-12 education and the work experience inside the walls of our school. As I balance what we're required to teach, not how we're required to teach it, but what we're required to cover inside of our classrooms, really thinking about our children who've expressed what does it mean to be a female engineer, right? And being able to bring the female engineer into the walls of our school and have not just a one-time speech from female engineers, but to have the learning that's occurring in the classroom from the female engineer perspective accessible to our children is what we're trying to figure out how to balance, but also mesh the K-12 educational system with workforce. So anybody have any creative ideas, please drop them in the chat or shoot me an email.
Awesome, thanks. So to have a learner-centered approaches, we need to think about our teachers, right? And how they are supported in terms of their professional learning. So a question about what shifts have you made in professional learning with educators to model student-centered practices? Any thoughts to share? Anyone jump in?
Yeah, I'd love to say that one of the most powerful experiences that educators, whether they be teachers or support staff in our systems, can engage in, that's both helpful and enlightening for them, but also really spurs this work is shadowing students. Shadowing students from, when they're making breakfast, getting on the bus, coming to school, what happens in the morning, and sitting with them at lunch, and then seeing where they go after school, who's supporting them, and so forth. And so I would say getting in the shoes of kids and seeing what it's really like to sit through 7 periods of a day in your school is absolutely critical. And then also developing teachers as curators of learning that, and this relates to your earlier question, I think, Kim, is that we've got really well-educated individuals with master's degrees who should be empowered to be curators of learning as opposed to just simply people who punch a clock, and they need to be respected as such, they need to be paid as such, and they need to be empowered as such.
I would have to say that Katie Martin is a master at this, okay? She's done training with our leadership team this past fall, and it was very learner-centered. It was about what the learner need. So the adult learner, you look at the adult learner and you say, okay, so what do they need? Let them make some choice of what they need, give them the time they need, a variety of ways of demonstrating proficiency, all of those pieces. So that's how we would respond. I want to add in one other thing though. It's listening to the adults in the system too, and knowing what they're feeling competent about and not competent about, and providing opportunities and the conditions for them to thrive. One thing that we've done in Lindsay, which is just a pride point significantly, is we've created a pipeline and a residency program. So Lindsay graduates come back to Lindsay. We pay for them to go to college, and they come back to be learning facilitators in Lindsay. And of the last 28 people that we've hired, 20 of them are former Lindsay learners. So these are children of poverty going to college and coming back to now serve Lindsay's children. And many of them so they lived in the performance-based system. They lived in the learner-centered model of Lindsay, and now they're coming back to actually be instructors in that. So again, it goes back to listening to the learner, even if they're the adult learner.
Sure. One last just quick strategy that we're in our first year really trying in the collaboration with school districts in Butler County, Ohio. Through our ESC under leadership of Chris Brown, we have an educator of color cohort that is underway right now. So educators of color, Black and brown from across the county convene every third Thursday of the month at our ESC. And it is an affinity group where they get the professional development that they are looking for with the affinity group that they belong to. It is customized for them to meet their needs. We have a facilitator from the ESC. No administrators allowed, not even myself, who was part of the same affinity group, but no administrators allowed. It is specifically for our educators to be able to relate, lean on, and support each other as they navigate how to function in education present day.
One of the things I would add on to that, we have affinity groups as well, and not at the scale of what Tom is doing, which I think is magnificent. But we do have what we call our bilingual teaching fellows program in partnership with Western Washington University, where we identify our bilingual paraeducators, and then they go through to your cohort model to get certified so they can come back. We find hiring dual language teachers is incredibly challenging. And similarly for teachers who are special education teachers, this past year, we just started a similar model for special ed as well. So a grow your own model.
I just want to highlight, Kim, I know you're going to jump in, but I just want to
Okay.
highlight the connections between all of them. And really, I think you said like learner-centered to me is really about every individual being a learner. And that does start with, you know, the leaders, educators, you know, community members, students. So really creating those experiences. And just like you all said, in all those examples, people create what they experience. If they're learning in community, they're pushing, you know, on their own bias and their own experiences, and they're thinking about new and different models in their own learning, then that's how we can create the opportunities for them to create those experiences for their students. And I think Eric said it best, like we have to give people closest to students and closest to the learners the resources, tools, and autonomy to do what's right for them.
Yes, yes, you're here. We are in the last 4 minutes here, and I'd love to pose a question, and you can choose to answer one or both. So as we are parting with this audience, you can share either some words of advice to those that are really eager to develop learner-centered environments, or you can talk about something that you're looking to do over the next year to evolve your learner-centered approach. So either words of advice or something that you're planning to do over the next year, or both, if you so choose. And so I'll go ahead and kick it off with Eric.
Thanks. Well, thanks, Kim, Digital Promise and Learner Center Collaborative. I can't say enough about the work that you do. So one piece of advice I would be is reach out to these two organizations to get their help. Triangulation is key. You cannot do this alone. Don't do this alone. And the other thing is that, you know, and this has just struck me recently, is that the environment that I see sort of like our world going to, everybody is emotionally dysregulated right now. And I think that it's very easy to sort of like hear from us and, you know, hear all this inspiration and sort of go to the place of like, why isn't my school doing this? Why isn't my board doing this? Why is my principal doing this? And I think that we just have to go back to that piece of like, we're all in this together and let's have a collaborative spirit. Start with questions and listening more than answers and frustration, and reach out to the resources that are out there, learn from one another, and don't be afraid to take risks.
Thank you. Let's go to Marlon. Thoughts?
Yeah, had a blast today. Hopefully you did as well. Hope my colleagues on the call are getting a little bit of rest around this fire. Keep it short and sweet for the sake of time. Walking into the future, we know what, right? We know what. I think for me, it's how do we go about doing it? And I would encourage us all to really think about how do we embrace the idea of co-designing the what. Oftentimes, I know I'm guilty of it, and I do it all the time. I get this idea and we just race, right? And you see it and you see it and you just go straight to execution. But for us as a system nationwide to start co-designing, right? Co-designing with vendors, co-designing with students, co-designing with educators, co-designing with leaders, but co-design, and see if our solutions are more accessible and effective for the children we've designed them to serve. Hope you had a good time today. Thanks for joining us, and please keep rooting for those Bengals. Who dey?
Thanks. Tom?
Quick word of advice would be like become known as like radically learner-centered, even if people hate you. Okay, that would be, just go for it, because that's what you got into it for, and kids will appreciate you for that. And then what we're going to do, we talked about this learning facilitator pathway and residency model. Just last weekend, we launched a learning facilitator leadership pathway. So we are taking our learning facilitators and training them to be the future leaders in Lindsay. And one of these days, one of those Lindsay kids is going to be in my seat, in every seat in the system. So excited about that.
Thanks, Tom. Susan?
So I think in this, I can tee up a potential other fireside chat topic. If we're going to bridge the relationship divide between our children and adults in the system, we have to bridge the relationship divide between the adults in the system.
Mhm.
And what I mean by that is we've got to move away from administration versus teachers, from anyone versus anyone. It has to be everyone coming together to work towards the success of our children. And you've heard me say this before, I call it #TeamKid, that every child is deserving of a team consisting of their family and their school staff, teacher, counselor, principal, whomever, and frankly, central office staff as well, working towards their success. So how can we break down the artificial barriers that get in the way of the adult relationships that are necessary to foster really student-centered learning, which will rest on relationships as well.
#TeamKid. I love it. Katie, it's been wonderful being a partner to you in this endeavor. Anything you want to share to wrap? And thank you for your support of Digital Promise and the League of Innovative Schools.
Yeah, just super honored to be here. Really, just admire this group so much and the work that they're doing. Love Team Kid and radically learner-centered. I would say we're super interested in prototyping and co-designing new metrics of success and new ways to share what we actually care about. So let's do it. Let's do it together and let's figure it out.
Great, thank you all. This is the last webinar in our Fireside Chat series. As we move into spring, we're going to turn off the fire and head into the spring. And thank you all for joining us today. Thank you, Eric, Tom, Susan, Marlon, and Katie. Take care.